15th Street Safety Project. And this project is, which we'll talk deeply about, is what I'm extremely excited about. So thank you for coming to our public meeting. And it's really on days like this where I'm grateful for the technology that allows us to meet virtually rather than go out in the weather and meet in a shared environment. Please excuse any screams, squeals, or other distractions from the various panelists. We're all broadcasting from our homes. So just forgive us any sort of interruptions of that nature. First, I'm going to run you through some slides about how to participate in this meeting. We have a couple things with the WebEx technology that are important for you to know. First of all, like I said, be patient with us. And we're just going to go through the controls if you want to go forward with that, my colleagues on the other end. So there's the audio and video controls here. You'll all be on mute. You cannot unmute yourself. The panelists are the only ones that will be speaking. And then we can unmute people during the Q&A and comment period. We're also trying to accept comments through the chat function if you want to send them in. I believe this is also being simulcast on Facebook Live, and we're kind of port over the questions that you may have. And here is the ways we're going to do that: the Q&A via the browser on the left, via the application on the right, if you want to use either of those functions. If you want to raise your hand, that's the control over there on the left. And if you want to do it on the right, that's the application control. We also have Asl Interpretation that you can use via the application, and I believe also via the web. And the view control is highlighted in red there. If you are in need of Asl Interpretation, you can use that, and it should be a little box that shows up in your on your screen. And with that, I think those are all the control. Oh, one more via the browser. I think this is some additional raise hand, audio, and switching controls via the browser. So hopefully everyone's got that. And it's my pleasure to introduce Sean Keneally, the NPS Deputy Superintendent of the National Mall and Memorial Parks, who's going to speak for a moment about this project. So Sean, go ahead.
Great, thank you, Will. I appreciate the introduction. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Keneally. I'm the Deputy Superintendent at the National Mall and Memorial Parks here in Washington, D.C. And the National Park Service is very excited to partner with the District of Columbia on another project to improve visitor safety in the city. The National Mall Memorial Parks is responsible for not only managing the monuments, memorials that a lot of people associate the National Park Service with, but we also have responsibility for managing about 1,000 acres of parkland in Washington, D.C., primarily Northwest and Southwest D.C. But the National Mall Memorial Parks also has 47 lane miles of roads that we maintain, and utilities and water lines and numerous other assets here at the National Mall. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk to you all this evening and talk about this great partnership that we've had with the District of Columbia with improving the 15th Street corridor, if you will. So the focus is on some safety improvements regarding the Cycletrack. That will be a continuation of what the National Mall and Memorial Parks has recently installed over by the Jefferson Memorial to get bicyclists safely across the 14th Street Bridge into the National Mall, right there to Jefferson Memorial. But there is a void between there and Pennsylvania Avenue where the District of Columbia's jurisdiction starts as well. So this is kind of that connection point. So it's cross-jurisdictional. National Park Service maintains a portion of 15th Street, and then the District of Columbia maintains another portion, and we'll talk about that in these slides. But this is a project that was identified in the National Mall Plan, which was a 2010 study. It's an environmental impact statement that the National Park Service completed in 2010, really looking at our 50 to 100-year vision of how we want to manage the National Mall into the future. So working with the District of Columbia, a lot of folks have put a tremendous amount of effort into this because this is somewhat of a complicated area There's a number of intersections that need to be navigated to safely get our visitors and our commuters and our general public, whether they're on a bicycle or other means of transportation, safely through the National Mall into the city. So it's also a continuation of what the National Mall Memorial Parks have done with regard to other crosswalks and other safety concerns on some of the other streets that we manage, particularly Constitution Avenue, Independence Avenue. We're looking at some safety improvements in those areas as well. So again, we're really excited about partnering with the District of Columbia. We are moving forward with this project with different approaches to it. So we're really looking forward to having your input in this. So I'd like to introduce my colleague over at DDOT, George Banyan. He's the manager of the Active Transportation Branch. So I'll turn it over to George. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sean. Am I coming through? Wait, let me start my video, hang on. There we go. All right, thank you, Sean. Good evening and welcome. I'm George Banyan and I manage the Active Transportation Branch in the Planning and Sustainability Division at DDOT. Our team is focused on making it safer and easier to bike and walk through the planning, design, and construction of bike lanes, trails, new sidewalks, crosswalk enhancements, and school area safety improvements. We at DDOT are also particularly excited about this project. It is an important southern continuation of the 15th Street Cycletrack, which was the first major protected biking facility in the district and one that has been transformative in its impact on bicycling in the city, generating the highest number of daily riders of any bike lane in the city. We look forward to seeing a similar transformation from this 15th Street Southern project. As Sean mentioned, this is a joint venture between the National Park Service and DDOT. It's an excellent example of a project where we have overlapping interests and is a great opportunity for collaborating on improving safety for both residents and visitors to the district. Will and the design team are eager to present the project and get your feedback, so thank you for attending. I'll turn it back over to Will then.
Thank you, George. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful project team led by Drew Silla, or Drew to us. If you want to take it away, Drew, and introduce yourself and the members of your team. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Kennelly and Mr. Banyan. It's a great introduction to the work that we've going to move forward today in this presentation. The agenda for I'm Drew Van Hengel. I'm the project manager for the design and the overall work that's related to the designing engagement for this project. I'm joined by my colleagues Ian Banks, Adriana Stanley, and Emily Oaksford, which I think is everybody. I'm going to kind of set the stage for the meeting and walk through a few of the points. So we're here resting on the what are we covering today slide. Our agenda is the introduction, which we've moved through, discussing why this project is important more deeply, talk about the goals, the concepts, discussion, which involves all of you here, and next steps for the project. Want to call your attention to the chat box and the website information on the left-hand side of this slide. Aisha from Inspire Green or James will put the link for the project overall for your availability to press on and open a website to see both the information, background information about the project in an evergreen way, and also an opportunity to participate and share the opportunity to participate in the survey about the project. On the next slide, we want to just dive into the introduction to the project overall, and set the stage for your consideration. The project extents are demonstrated on this slide. 15th Street from Pennsylvania Avenue to Main Avenue. We already talked about the connection that this project makes, but we want to dive into that a little bit further. After we talk to you about on the next slide, what's involved in the effort of putting down a two-way protected bike lane or cycle track along this corridor area. There are several stages of the work that we've undertaken to get to this point today. We've conducted an existing and existing conditions analysis, which asks the questions: how do people walk, scoot, bike, roll, and drive in this area? Where are crashes happening? What are the operational or operational considerations to think about with respect to traffic signals and timing, and making it safe and comfortable for people to walk across and along 15th Street, but also bike up and down 15th Street. The second phase of our work is to develop interim improvement plans, and interim improvement plans are those that will be installed with DDOT paving crews. So our work will bring the design far enough so that the two-way cycle track can actually be put on the ground with the upcoming pavement maintenance schedule. And then the next stage of our work is to develop a more some tactical improvements that can't be constructed by the paving crew, but that might require concrete, more detailed concrete work, for example, that would happen at a future time. So our project brings the interim improvements plans to 100% so that they can be put down on the street. And then our work with DDOT also includes this 30% design for a long-term permanent project that will be moved through design and construction over the next couple of years. Another piece of our work is to think about how maintenance will be maintenance responsibilities will be codified between the National Park Service and DDOT. As Deputy Superintendent Kennelly alluded to, this is a complex multi-jurisdictional area, and we want to make sure that the agencies are working together to ensure that as you move from north to south or south to north along the project area, that you don't feel the difference in and moving across, for example, from the DDOT owned street to the NPS owned street. And turns out that making those agreements is pretty a simple part, and the agreement and the collaboration among the agencies for this project has been really phenomenal so far. And at the bottom of this slide, we talk about the public involvement. This is the first of 2 meetings that are public facing, and then we are also having collaboration and input from key stakeholders, the federal agencies along the corridor planning area, the community, the tour bus operators, any number of special groups to protect and enhance the area around the National Park Service land, and the White House, obviously. So if we could go to the next slide, show you where we are in the process. October, November, and December, we worked on doing this existing conditions analysis, which I described, and developing some interim concepts. And what that means is we put pen to paper or AutoCAD drawings to digital templates and work through the questions around sticky elements which might persist with respect to making sure that the project provides a safe and comfortable bicycling environment, walking environment, driving environment, and scooting environment. We do several rounds of the draft concept development in order to bring them to a place where we're comfortable to do more detailed design. And we're just about at that place where we're submitting some, I don't know the percent, but some plans that are pretty we're very solid in their operational characteristics, and we're looking forward to telling you about some of the solves that we've been working along to create the environment that we aspire for. And that's why we're here today. And then moving forward after this meeting, we'll refine the interim plan, that is that short-term plan that will be installed by the paving crew, and get that into the pipeline for scheduling via additional federal stakeholder meetings, resolution of comments or concerns related to those meetings, a second public meeting, which we intend to have in May or June. And in July, August of this year is when the planned repaving of Ohio Drive will incorporate this construction of the interim design. And while that is underway, our design team will be dealing with and addressing some of the bigger elements in a permanent installation, which would involve, as I mentioned before, more detailed concrete work, for example, stuff that can't be handled by the paving project, the repaving project. So why is this project important? This project has been proposed in 2 previously approved plans. The National Mall Plan in 2010 identified the need for a separated bike route or lane along 15th Street. The NPS National Park Service paved trail study in 2016 also identified 15th Street between Pennsylvania and Maine as a high volume and non-motorized travel corridor. It proposed the extension of the cycle track as a short-term improvement within a 0 to 2 year time frame, extending the cycle track south along 15th Street between Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest and Constitution Avenue by removing vendor and street bus operations on the west side of the street, extending the connection all the way through to Main Avenue in an area between existing sidewalk and road, and considering the assets and how they can be moved to accommodate a cycle track. On the next slide, I just wanted to also mention that this project was mentioned in Is Key and Move DC, which proposed a protected cycle track and off-street trail connection, extending the existing cycle track all the way to the bridge on the south at 14th Street. And this has been in the master plan since 2014, and luckily now with National Park Service's support, the protected on-street facility can extend across the mall, which further separates conflicts between people walking, biking, and other micromobility users like scooters. If we can go to the next slide, thank you. The 15th Street, no, not that one. We can back up a slide, thank you. This proposed gap will close an existing bikeway gap, and it's the gap is illustrated in within the box with the dash lines. It will extend from north of the National Mall to the Mount Vernon Trail 14th Street Bridge, one of the 2 bridges that connects Virginia to DC's Central Business District. So it's really a key corridor. It's also the logical alignment for a protected bicycle lane. It's a principal, 14th Street is a principal arterial, 14th Street, which was also considered as a principal arterial truck route, snow emergency route, and provides main access to the freeway, while 15th Street provides lower traffic alternatives for bicycle access and direct access to the 14th Street bicycle bridge facility. Uniquely, it also bridges across facilities that 2 different agencies are responsible for. As I mentioned before, as a user, we hope you won't perceive any jurisdictional boundaries as you pass from DDOT to National Park Service lanes. But where that does happen is at Constitution Avenue, where we illustrate on the top of the 2 bracketed segments of 15th Street that DDOT roadway is to the north and National Park Service roadway is to the south. The National Park Service also will be planning to install a cycle track this summer in 2021 during repaving activities. So now is really the moment to consolidate these 2 projects and extend the reach of this project even further. So a little bit more about the characteristics about this corridor. Capital bike share and scooter usage shows there are hotspots at the National Mall locations. That's no surprise to any of you. 7 of the 10 Capital Bike Share station trip pairs in the period of 2018 to 19 involved stations on the National Mall, indicating that a lot of Capital Bike Share usage is happening over there, and that is often characteristic of tourist usage. Currently, bicycles and scooters utilize the many pathways along the National Mall, causing crowding and conflicts. In the middle describes that there is a high, so that's the left map. The map in the middle, it describes the volume of people using the application called Strava, which illustrates on the darker colors where more people are bicycling and recording their trips. And then the shared scooter heat map on the right refers to, shows locations where shared scooter usage is highest within the project area, which is outlined by the oval. So all that to say, there's a lot of activity over here. And visitors are an important user group to this area. There are several considerations that we needed to take as we thought about how to advance this project, which we're going to go into more detail in future slides. But at a high level, the big bus and circulator laybys are located along the National Mall on the west side of 15th Street. All these laybys are serviced by the DC Circulator National Mall route, and the Big Bus Sightseeing Company uses laybys numbers 2 and 3, and I just want to point those out on this slide. Those are the big numbers 2 and 3 that run along 15th Street. So we want to make sure the access for people using transit and tour service companies is maintained, because it's important that people have the highest quality user experience getting to the National Park Service assets in order to really amplify that it's better to visit these resources using shared transportation or walking or biking than it is to try to find a place to park and drive and park over there. On the next slide, we wanted to point out that we do anticipate some decline in vehicular level of service as a result of this project. And the DDOT is choosing to do this anyway. This is a project that is called out as we described in many plans. There are safety issues along the corridor, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you could go to the next slide, Ian, that would be, or Emily, that would be great. And because there's not a way to implement this planned and approved project and also keep vehicle traffic the way it is while working within the established right-of-way, which is that curb to curb that is established by the street as has been historically constructed. So because we need to provide safe and connected walkways and bikeways to support local trips and support DDOT and city goals, we look at the impact in many different ways. 15th Street is a large right-of-way with truck and bus restrictions, which we mentioned, with only exceptions for metro buses and one tour bus. And so it's a natural candidate compared to 14th Street, for example, which is designated as a truck and bus through route, which should be prioritized for both the larger vehicles and passenger vehicles, as it provides direct highway access to I-395. So in other words, this is a street, 15th Street is a place that should serve people. And what we're trying to illustrate through this drawing is that when we think about the way it's configured now, it's 15th Street in a typical cross section, about 22,400 people are served in passenger cars, transit, walking and biking. But if we reconfigure and make better and more economic use of the space, 28,300 people can be served on that same right-of-way. So we're really opening up a window for more people to benefit from use of the street. But we are also seriously considering the impact on passenger car delay. And so we have studied that as part of our design process. And the range of delay currently experienced in signalized intersections along these corridors is anything from 6 to 58 seconds. And that's like the average delay that is experienced over many time windows at each unique signalized intersection. So the future average delay that's expected upon our examination of the existing and proposed future conditions is between 1 and 88 seconds. So at the intersection that experiences the most delay, it will amount to about a 30-second average delay. And at many of the other intersections, there won't be a change for people driving cars. Again, the support for this project comes from there being ample routes that already exist for diverting the traffic, primarily 14th Street. Any eliminated traffic movements that we've considered as a part of this project can be accommodated by easily accessible alternative routes. Also, the heavy demand for access to the National Park Service assets merits designs for active transportation using less space and serving more people. And there's a piece of this that is a great unknown, because we don't know what the return to work looks like. So any of the traffic projections that we use to calculate those average delays will be really borne out after the project is really on the ground. But we really anticipate a smaller increase in delay than that which is calculated by our models. So if you go to the next slide, just talk a little bit about why this is such an important to support people moving around this area in different ways in visiting the National Park Service assets and others along the corridor. People get around in different ways, and the concurrent movement of turning vehicles and pedestrians crosses, for example, and conflicts can result from that. The concurrent movements of turning vehicles and pedestrians crossing pose safety risks that can be eliminated by adding additional signal phases or prohibiting movements. Motor vehicle, maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah, thanks. Motor vehicle and so there's a couple of, I want to back up a second. There are when vehicles and people walking and people bicycling are making conflicting movements in the same phase or at the same time, you can be setting up for a condition where crashes can be experienced. So the typical conflict typologies on this corridor are vehicles, conflicts among people driving and people walking or biking. And a large one is what happens when people are walking along a corridor, but people driving can make that a turning movement at the same time as they're walking. And this can be either a left turn or a right turn. And so that there's an opportunity for exposure for turning moving crashes when a green light means go for both a pedestrian walking along the street and a driver turning off of it. Along the National Mall pathways, the designation for the pathways is that it's a bicycle way, and so that design built in some conflicts already, so that when the pathways are experiencing heavy demand, people walking and people biking and scootering are necessarily set up for potential conflicts on the path, and providing a way to separate the people into different lanes, so to speak, really helps to eliminate the potential for future crashes among people walking, biking, and scooting. And finally, we have some opportunities. We studied a potential conflict which could emerge by using the curb to curb, and that conflict would be among people people driving buses, crossing across people bicycling, and also the alighting and boarding of people on and off of buses at the lay-bys. And our design reduces the risk of that potential conflict quite a bit. If we could go to the next slide. Okay, and why do we want to avoid conflicts? Because conflicts can lead to crashes. There are 200 plus crashes involving all modes that occur on the 15th Street corridor within the study area during the period between 2015 and 2020. The benefit of doing this project and focusing both on people walking and biking and rolling is that we can design out some of those inherent conflicts, such as the ones that I just described. I want to talk a little bit about the collisions. The 15th Street has lower vehicle volumes than 14th Street does, as I mentioned before, but more crashes are happening over on 15th than there are on 14th and 12th. Of the 200 crashes that occurred in the project area, 10 involve people walking, 14 involve people bicycling. There are several the intersections that have been determined to be unsafe in accordance with the Vision Zero goals that that DC holds, and by eliminating permissive vehicle turn movements, those ones where drivers are moving across the crosswalk at the same time as people walking along the crosswalk, and by providing a dedicated space for people to bike, we can start to expect to see a reduction in crashes in this area and an increased understanding of the legibility of the road and less confusion and erratic behavior by people using all modes. So it's not just about the statistics, it's about the people. And in our design, if we could go to the next slide, we've really been thinking about all the different users and the potential benefits and trade-offs for people walking, people bicycling, people driving, and tourists, importantly, to this area. I wonder if you can go to the next slide. There we go. So we're using kind of a high-level evaluation system in order to explain to you tonight what the potential trade-offs are for each of the characters or persona, the walker Willa, biker B, driver Dana, and tourist Tom, and in terms of, and also what the benefits are for them. And so one more slide for me, or a couple, I guess, that I want to go over as we think about how we're going to evaluate the potential trade-offs for each of these user types. We need to really surface what the goals are for the project and what we're trying to accomplish. So the three principal goals are, if we could just go forward 2 slides. The three principal goals are safety, providing a safe right-of-way for people regardless of whether they're walking, biking, driving, scooting, using transit. And so the second goal for the project is to convey an ease of use, to improve the function of the street and at the intersections to make them easier to use and understand and more legible. And then the third goal is this piece that we're calling access and delay. We want to be able to measure at a high level how we balance travel delay with right-of-way capacity and access for everyone who uses the street. And thinking again, not only about people driving, but also people walking, biking, and using transit. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adriana, who will talk about some of the design recommendations that we wanted to surface for you tonight.
Thanks, Drew. So if we could go to the next slide. So I'm going to be presenting to you what we are hoping to get on the street here relatively quickly. So that's that interim design concept. That's what we've got drawn up for you. And I'm just going to kind of step you through the design process, some issues and some opportunities that we've seen on the corridor, and how we're working through them, so that you can kind of get a sense of where we're going, and then of course provide your input and we can have discussion about what you're seeing. So if you go to the next slide, we'll start at the beginning. We have to figure out what we're going to put on the street. So what does a cycle track look like? There's three great examples from Seattle, from Chicago, and from literally just up the street from Washington, D.C. that we kind of looked to when we were trying to figure out what to put down to make sure that people had a safe place to ride their bikes. So some key things you'll note. It's a two-way facility. So you're going to have bicycles going in both directions on one side of the street. As opposed to having cars with the center line, you almost have like a little mini road on the side of your road. The other thing that you'll notice is that there is some sort of protection. In this case, in Seattle, they have some nice planters. In Chicago, they have a couple of bollards and some paint and some parked cars. And then up the street in Washington, D.C., there's a raised delineator or bollard that's providing additional protection for those vulnerable people who are riding on the same elevation as a car driving to make sure that they have space where they feel safe. And typically these are about 8 feet to about 12 feet wide. So that's about like travel lane to a little bit skinnier than a travel lane with, the size of a planter, or about 3 feet of protection for the bikes. So if you go to the next slide, you'll note that the 15th Street corridor that we're talking about is in a pretty unique area, right? Like we've got the view shed to the National Mall in this location. So some of those delineators and things that are sticking up aren't necessarily what we want to be putting there, but we still definitely need protection for bicycles. So we're thinking potentially about using something like this. So a concrete wheel stop, a low median edge, something with a reflective side that's low but durable and strong so that people are protected while also the view shed is retained. That'll be what we use in the vicinity of the National Mall, subject to approval by the National Park Service and going through that rigor. And then north of Constitution Avenue, where we're kind of getting out of that view shed, we'll consider adding some flex posts, so those more vertical elements for added protection and added reinforcement that this is a place for bicycles and it's not a place to be driving or parking your car. So go to the next slide. You can kind of take a look. We've taken that section that we just built up together and we placed it down where it's going to be. So this is a pretty exciting picture for me. I hope it is for you as well. This is what it may look like when we go in and repave and place this facility down on the street. So you can see that the cyclists are on the National Mall side. So there's fewer openings, fewer places for cars to intrude. You get a nice quick ride along a beautiful place that's protected, that's on the existing street. And so that's all well and good, but where the design really comes in is at the next slide, which is what I'm going to dive into with you. So we've got these beautiful stretches, which as a driver, as a rider, as a walker, you know that when you're between intersections, it's kind of like free sailing, like we've got it figured out. But it's at these nodes, it's at intersections and points of conflict, at bus laybys, where we really have to dive in and take a look at what's going on there to make sure that all modes can travel through those places safely. So I'm going to be talking through the plans with you today. I'm going to be going from Pennsylvania Avenue in the north, that's your bullet point 1, all the way down to Main Avenue in the south. So that's number 6. So if we go to the next slide, we'll get started. Okay, so this is Pennsylvania Avenue. We've now just kind of flipped our way up onto an aerial. North is to your right, that's that little north arrow. The White House access road is at the top of your screen. Pennsylvania Avenue is at the bottom of your screen. So we're kind of oriented in that way. And we're looking at the terminus of the existing cycle track on 15th Street, kind of to your right where that green box is. So the challenge here is to make sure that we can get bicycles coming off of Pennsylvania onto the cycle track and vice versa safely. So we need to take a little bit of room from that striped out center median in order to provide space for that to happen. And then we also need to have room for the cycle track itself. So how do we achieve that? We achieve it by taking a lane. So we're repurposing that parking lane that's on the Capitol Mall side, and we're narrowing up some lanes in order to provide room for that wide cycle track and that protected buffer. So that's kind of the situation at Pennsylvania. And then we'll proceed south to the next slide. So we've traveled down the National Mall. We had our smooth sailing for a little bit, and then we run into our next problem. That's Constitution Avenue. Constitution Avenue, if you were checking out the crash map that Drew presented earlier, is one of the places where we have a lot of crashes that are happening that involve pedestrians and people using that crosswalk to get across the National Mall. So something we noticed when we took a look at what was going on at this signal in the existing condition is Constitution Avenue. It's a pretty congested place, and we have a couple of what we call permissive turning movements. So we have a permissive left turn, which is kind of on the left side of your screen there, where people kind of pull into the intersection and they wait for a gap in oncoming traffic, and they squeak out their turn as the yellow light's going, which can introduce a conflict if there's a pedestrian in that crosswalk. You can be so focused on getting that gap in traffic that you don't notice the human being crossing the street. So the first thing we said is we're going to, in order to ensure that there's safe crossings for all, and especially for this new contraflow cycle track that's coming through this area, we're going to turn that into a protected only phase. So if you were a driver turning left on the Constitution from 15th, you will have to wait for your green arrow, and we won't have that situation where you're looking for a gap in traffic again. Similarly, we have only 2 lanes heading southbound on Constitution now, and one of them has to drop as you're heading south because we don't have enough space on the other side of the intersection. So that's going to become a right turn only lane, and that too will be protected. So you won't be able to turn right on red across pedestrians and across bicycles at this intersection. So that's what we're looking at to do on Constitution. So if we head to the next slide, we'll continue our ride south. So 15th starts to curve around the Washington Monument, and then we run into a pair of intersections that are at Jefferson Drive on your left and Madison Drive on your right. So here we have a nice wide cycle track, and we have these 3-way crossings where you have a lot of people who are trying to get to and from the attractions on either side of the National Mall. It's a pretty straight shot for the cycles. The only thing we're doing here is we're extending the traffic signal timing. So it's about 55 seconds in the morning right now, and then 110 seconds in the afternoon. We're extending it to be 110 seconds to get a little bit more out of that signal, including adding a pedestrian-only crossing phase so that people who want to cross to or from the National Mall can do so with all traffic stopped. So continue to the next slide. So we've gotten through that turn, and now we're coming down to Independence Avenue. So this is where things get a little bit more tricky. Independence Avenue has a really interesting shape to it, and we need to make sure that the cycles can get through there in their own space, and that vehicles, once again, won't be turning across those bicycles or people walking when they're not supposed to. So once again, at Independence, we're only allowing right turns on the green arrow southbound. to avoid conflicts with your bicycles and your pedestrians. The other thing that's happening here is heading northbound. There's an issue we've discovered thanks to the funky shape of this intersection, as well as the time it takes to get through this intersection. We have a constraint. And the constraint is basically there's not enough room in space or in time to allow the currently just permissive, so again, you're waiting for your gap in traffic, left turns from 15th onto Independence. We took a look at the volumes there. So there's only 6 or 7 vehicles doing this today. They could go up to Constitution and make that turn. So we've made the call to prohibit that northbound left turn. And southbound today, that movement, so the opposite sort of movement, isn't allowed in the peak. And so we're saying we're not going to allow it at all either, to just get us more room and more space and more time for people to cross. So if we go down, we're going to wind up at our final sticking point. So Main Avenue. So if you thought Independence was a little bit tricky, Main Avenue, as you know, is a pretty complicated intersection, and it's right where this project needs to plug into the NPS project that's going to be snaking around the tidal basin. So it's kind of the conclusion of the project. And we have this slip lane that, again, like 3 or 4 vehicles we noticed use in the peak, and is otherwise not used. And it complicates things for drivers, it complicates things for people crossing, and it complicates things for the cycle track. So we're proposing to close that as part of this project and run the cycle track through to the stop bar at Main Avenue so that cyclists can then just go straight across and then continue on their way. Go to the next slide. You can see the other half of the intersection. So that's that movement that I was talking about, where you see those striped green bars. That's where you would ride on your bicycle in order to turn onto Main itself and then continue on your way onto the National Park Service cycle track. You'll note that we're achieving that by essentially taking one of the 3 lanes coming off the Couts Bridge. It briefly develops and then it goes away. So we're taking that, we're going to probably provide a turn pocket that goes into the tidal basin parking, but then we'll just stripe it out and then protect it so that someone who's confused or wants to get around traffic doesn't wind up in that space and in conflict with the cycle track itself. So go to the next slide. You can just take a look and see, again, this is what I was talking about here. So that's maintaining those 2 lanes, making sure that that cycle track is really well protected because there is a lot of space there for someone to errantly drive in. And then we just tie into our partner's project. Next slide. So the other thing that we needed to consider that Drew noted when she was talking about balancing the needs of all modes, we're starting to talk about the transit and I think the tourist piece too, at the 3 bus laybys on the project. So we noodled about with this a lot because we were trying to balance like needing to get something on the ground now with needing to do the safest thing. And what we've arrived at is what you see in front of you. So at the existing bus laybys today, there's this really narrow median strip. It's raised that's kind of protecting the lay-by itself and the buses and the lay-by from traffic. So we're taking that and we're essentially making it a little bit wider. So now we have an island for people to stand on when they get off of their bus, and they can kind of dwell in and be safe before crossing the cycle track, which is actually going to take the space of the lay-by behind it. So as a rider, you're going to be going kind of straight shot down 15, and then you're going to wiggle behind into the existing lay-by space, still on the asphalt, and then wiggle back over. What we've managed to do by taking a lane on 15 and widening that island and wiggling that cycle track is to provide a pullout on the street side of 15th for buses. So buses will be able to pull in, drop off people, and then pull out without ever crossing the cycle track. So that eliminates a pretty big concern we had about how that interaction would go, and then replaces it with just a need to, stop and yield and watch for people crossing from that island to the National Mall and vice versa. Go to the next slide. That was one consideration we had, and then the other consideration we had is the best laid plans, mice and men, work really, really well until it starts snowing, as we're starting to learn. So we need to make sure that there's agreements in place to operate and maintain this facility so that it remains safe in all weathers for all people. So right now we're working through a couple of these maintenance gray areas to make sure that they're on point before this thing opens up. So, DDOT is going to maintain the concrete vertical separation on this project. As you see there, they can put it down so they can make sure that they maintain it. If a snowplow hits it, something like that, it's taken care of. DDOT's also going to provide snow clearance in the cycle track, so you won't have just a snowdrift sandwiched between two pieces of concrete. And then NPS is working to develop an alternative snow storage solution on the mall. So go to the next slide. I think with that, Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about just the overall trade-offs that we are seeing in this design.
Sure thing. Thank you, Adriana. Yeah, just a couple of quick points. Again, we're considering how this project will affect all users, what the trade-offs are for the different user types, and we introduced the kind of persona of a person walking, a person biking, a person driving, a person in town to tour the assets. And really, we see this as a win-win for all the user types, with the possible mixed results in the category of access and delay. And I wanted to elaborate on that for a little bit for the people walking and for the people driving. So people walking will experience some lengthier lights at Madison and Jefferson in exchange for the all pedestrian crossing signal, where there would be no conflicts because all other traffic does not move at that time. And what that means is that the call for the crossing comes up once per cycle instead of twice per cycle into orthogonal or perpendicular movements. And so a little bit longer time between crossing opportunities in exchange for an all pedestrian crossing signal, where everybody else comes to a stop while people walking make their crossings. For the driver, as I described before, there was some expected increase in average delay at some signals. These longer delays are minimal as you start to think about the total length of journey that a driver takes to move along the corridor. And the exchange for this is clearer turning movements, more predictable ones, less risk of conflicts and potential collisions, and designated areas for all roadway users. And we can go to the next slide. These characters are important to us, but I'm not going to belabor them too much. Our judgment is that with the improvements, people walking, Walker Willa will enjoy her time more with friends, taking in the scenery of the mall, snapping photos, and popping in and out of museums with the security and safety of protected crossings with no permissive turning movements across that action. Biker B will have a similar experience with the cycle track in place. B will feel more secure biking along 15th Street. She will be moved off of the potential conflicts with people walking like Walker Willie by being in a designated and clear lane. And there are fewer hurdles and more connections to commuting by bicycling by filling in this gap. What we've experienced in other cities is that the safety benefits of cycle tracks, and you've experienced in them in DC as well, the safety benefits are well documented, that with a clear delineated cycle track and dedicated signals for different road users, drivers see people walking and biking more clearly, they feel more comfortable and assured about what they're supposed to do while they're traveling along the streets. And the downstream impact of that is that protected bikeways provide a documented safer experience for collisions involving all users, including people driving. And then the tourists. With a redesigned 15th Street, tourist Tom can hop on and off the DC circulator with ease. After seeing the popularity of the new cycle track, he might even try Capital Bike Share next time he's in town and ride it on the place that's designated for him. So with that, we'd love to turn over the technology for or describe, which I'm not very good at, the technology related to how you can tell us what you think. We really appreciate the use of the Q&A feature, which you've been using throughout the course of this project. All of our team members have been trying to respond to those questions with answers. We also, before we do this, we will also be able to answer your questions verbally if you use the raise hand feature, which we'll describe earlier, and we can call on you in the order that the hands go up, or at least in the order that we see them. And then also we want to make sure that you share your comments and ideas, and also share the opportunity to comment and share ideas by following the link to our 5-question survey. There are questions that we ask you to about yourself and your propensity to about and how you feel about this Cycletrack, and learn more. And there you at the website you can also learn more about the project. So sorry, that was a little bit bungled, but I think Aisha can copy and paste now, I hope, the SurveyMonkey link into the Q&A session, which will drive you directly to either the survey or the website. And we're really hoping that we can track our engagement authentically, so we understand from what parts of the city people are coming to our public meetings, where we might need to do additional work to ensure that there is a representative sampling of people providing us input on this project. So please do take the survey so we can know how we can improve and in what ways we should extend our engagement as we move forward. So with that, I think it's the time to talk about where we're headed, and but I think we should wait. Sorry, backing up, because if this is the time where we're having discussion, we should do that now. And I don't know how to do that. Can somebody else hop in? I can't see the participants' hands. Maybe there are not.
I know we're fielding a lot of questions to the Q&A.
Yep.
So we will continue to do that.
If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Your hand can be found. Aisha.
You can raise your hand by going to the participants panel.
Thank you.
In the bottom right corner of your WebEx window if you're joining us through the desktop app. If you're on the browser, I believe the raise hand will be again through the person icon, which is the bottom middle of your screen. And there should be a similar control if you're joining us on a mobile app. We do have 3 hands raised. I don't know who was first. So it looks like Judy Floyd. I will unmute you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the hard work that you have put into this plan. I'm also very glad that you considered the tourist who comes to Washington, D.C. as an independent traveler and uses D.C. Circulator. I'm speaking as a tour guide for preformed groups. I want you to think about a 5th grade group that might come from Michigan, and they travel on their motor coach from Michigan to Washington, D.C. They travel on their motor coach between the monuments and memorials. Their access to the south side of the White House has traditionally been parking the motor coach on 18th Street, walking by the street vendors, which are very popular, and it's nice to let our local vendors get some money, and then going to the south side of the White House and that White House pavilion. I'm wondering how those 5th graders will have that access in the future. And may I also remind you that we have a large number of senior citizens who travel in preformed motor coach groups that have limited walking abilities.
Do we want to have DDOT answer this one?
Yep.
I think that might be. So we are working with the motor coach groups, as well as understanding that is the desired path for the motor coach operators. And I've not to put words in their mouth, but I think there's generally an interest in getting to the White House area primarily for photo opportunities. And I think that it's been expressed to me it could be on the north side, could be on the south side. And we're working to find new space for the motor coaches on New York Avenue. There's also the opportunities to park motor coaches in front of the White House Visitor Center, directly across the street from the sort of East Street gate. And they're going to open the new Pershing Memorial, the World War I Memorial, that's right across the street. So I don't have the final word on the curbside designation there, but there are many places where we can find alternate locations for motor coaches to park that are proximate here. One truism of transportation when we're doing rights of way is we cannot move those to different streets and expect people to continue in a straight path. So the nature of extending the 15th Street Cycletrack requires that it stays on the west side of the street and it continues in that alignment. So the existing incumbent users will be displaced out of their current locations. That's both motor coaches and vending locations.
Hey, Will, this is Sean Keneally with the Park Service. I just also want to add that the National Park Service has metered parking along Constitution Avenue between 15th Street and 17th Street. It's 3-hour metered parking, which we found to work well to try to encourage folks to park in that area for that time, but also discourages the commuters in the area because of the 3-hour limit.
Great, thank you both. If the person who is handling the hands can, Judy, if you can unraise your hand, then we'll make sure that we can keep track of people's raised hands. Mark, maybe we can move to Mark now, just moving down the participant.
Okay, Mark, we are unmuting you. Also, a quick tip for anybody who has called in directly. If you would like to raise your hand, dial *3, and that will raise your hand. Thank you.
Great. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Just a quick thank you so much for this project. It's I've biked this corridor for the last 15 years, and it's incredibly dangerous, and I'm so happy that this is moving forward. I just wanted to understand kind of some of the differences between the interim plan and what the more long-term plan might be. So an example is the closure of the slip lane at Main Avenue. It looks like that's going to be flex posts for now. Is that going to get a more robust, I guess, treatment in the future?
So right now, yeah, I don't know that we have decided exactly on what materials we're going to use to close that slip lane under the concept that we're dealing with. It could be something more substantial than flex post, and most likely it will be something more substantial. I think we're showing it as that just to, at this stage we're fairly early, just to indicate that it is closed, and yeah, that's an open question, but I think something a little more hardened. And then, depending on the barrier that we use for the Cycletrack, that the Cycletrack itself will block the slip lane from being accessible from the southbound vehicular lanes. So I think between the two, it will be closed.
Great. And just one quick additional question. At Independence and Constitution were mentioned early in the presentation. Is there anything that could be shared about those potential safety measures that might be going in the future?
Can you say that one more time? Did you say Constitution? And broke up a little
Constitution and Independence. It was mentioned earlier in the presentation as potential safety measures that might be connecting, like the 4th Street and the 15th Street protected bike lanes.
Hey, Will. I think I mentioned that in my opening remarks. That was some portions of the Park Service road. So, for example, we are looking at a crosswalk at 18th and Constitution Avenue. And then we're also looking at a better crosswalk area by the MLK Memorial on Independence Avenue, which is in the MLK DC War Memorial area.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Molly, can you please unmute Michael Eichler?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Looks like you're doing a lot of really good work evaluating reduction in conflicts and accommodating all users and making some tough choices. But I think the cyclists along this corridor have been suffering through some poor choices for the last 20 whatever years. So it's really good to see that we're finally getting some attention. I just wanted to raise a couple thoughts I had. Some of them in the Q&A, but I'll just kind of mention them since I've got the mic. My first comment really is, the Cycletrack is going to be wonderful, but there are days when like the sidewalk is filled with bicycles. Like, just wondering what PS is considering doing to allow cyclists to know that they can be on the sidewalk as well as in the Cycletrack, and perhaps allow faster cyclists to be in the Cycletrack and kind of direct the slower, more casual cyclists on bike share bikes kind of to stay on the sidewalk, to really allow for better throughput. And also just considering if all the bikes that I see often that are on the sidewalk there are all funneled into that narrow bike lane, they won't clear the intersection in the time for one signal. So it is something to really be concerned about during peak beautiful days. Again, the sidewalks are filled with bikes. So how to accommodate that volume of bicycles on the sidewalk in addition to the cycle track. Also, just wanted to echo the idea of the bus boarding islands, using some sort of railings or something that would allow us to restrict where the peds could cross the cycle track only to maybe 1 or 2 spots, so you don't have random people stepping into the cycle track the entire time. And then thirdly, just wondering if the project team is aware of the issues. I believe it was Boston had some similar low profile barriers to protect the cycle track, and cars were speeding, flipping, and their solution to fixing this problem was to remove the barriers and not to do things that were more common sense, like calm the traffic and slow the cars down to ensure that they don't even reach speeds that could result in flipping when they hit the barrier. So I appreciate the idea of using a low profile barrier to reduce visual impact on the National Mall and the view sheds, but there may be some other things needed to ensure that the cars stay at reasonable speeds and don't have drastic problems when they hit if they hit those barriers, especially considering the curvature in the roadway on 15th Street down by the Washington Monument. So I'll end now, but I just, again, thank you very much for great work, very comprehensive, and I'm really looking forward to enjoying this facility for years to come.
And just to speak to, so the question was about the barriers themselves and the vehicle speeds. I think you were referencing a situation in Massachusetts where a car had hit them at speed and flipped. We're using a very similar barrier, or at least that's the idea, is to use a very similar barrier, is the ones on Irving Street, on 1st Street Northeast, on 4th Street Southwest, a number of other locations. But we have not had that circumstance in DC. Yes, there are all sorts of chaotic things that happen. I think one of the key features of this project is it's really changing the design speed of 15th Street. Right now, it's got a fairly fast design speed, and by doing this, it's also a road diet, right, or a lane reduction project. So by doing it that way, we will hopefully tame some of the traffic and manage it in a new way that's better for pedestrians, better for cyclists. And I think that those circumstances with high speed are less likely in the future condition than they are now.
Thank you, Will. And Michael also expressed that we consider the boarding islands carefully with respect to how the pedestrians flow across them, and work with NPS to consider what the policy will be related to supporting wandering bicyclists on the sidewalk as after this facility goes up. So we'll take those questions into our design team for future consideration. Thank you. Molly, can you unmute Zachary Posnick, please?
Hi. Yeah, thank you all so much. This has been really great. I was wondering, as someone who definitely has biked this quite a few times, if there were any plans to extend this further down Main Avenue so that the Wharf, Arena Stage, Navy Yard is more accessible without kind of being on that strange mixed sidewalk biking area that to get all the way to the Wharf. So yeah, I was wondering about that, but this definitely is a really great project, and I'm really happy with everything y'all have said. Couldn't be more excited to ride on more bike lanes in DC.
Thank you, Zachary, and I'll jump in on that one. Probably I've been using this one a lot lately, but there's a Johnny Cash song called "One Piece at a Time," and I think so. We're really focused on getting this extension done. I know exactly the sidewalk you mean. I ride it very frequently, and I'm a big for about 10 years. I rode this corridor almost daily, so I know it extremely well. I know some of the issues extremely well, and I'm trying to work through all those. But right now, there is the bike route that goes from, essentially the point where we pick up East Basin Drive. It's a sidewalk running bike route. If it's not cherry blossom or high tourist season, it's pretty usable. But when that's not, when it is one of those situations, it can be pretty tight. So we continue to try to build and improve the bike network and make it more interconnected. This is a big missing piece, and so we're really excited to deliver this one. So I'll leave it at that. And I think there was another question about independence as well. I know that has had some prior planning work on it. Again, on this project, we're focused on getting this missing link. So I think there are other venues that DDOT will answer some of those longer term questions. We're trying really hard to build it, and hopefully we can give you some satisfaction on some of these other elements to make it a really complete and integrated bike network throughout the city.
Definitely, and really quick, just one more other thing. I know kind of further down that. There comes a place where like pedestrians walk into the bike lane a lot down near the wharf, and I was wondering if you were going to do a raised bike lane going along the National Mall, if there was plans to like make obstructions so that pedestrians didn't wander into the cycle lane, because I think that is a big problem that I've seen a lot too.
Yeah, and we're certainly aware of these issues, and a lot comes to very specific and detailed questions about grade separation and adjacent uses. The wharf has a tremendous and sort of unique mix of very pedestrian uses, and so we're aware of those conflicts. This is a grade separated cycle track, so it's going to be at street level. So there will be a curb, and there's some existing fencing, chain fencing along most of it along the mall that does separate pedestrians from that space. But we continue to look at this and try to, use our best judgment depending on all the factors involved to produce, very usable and high quality bicycle facilities.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Molly, can you please unmute Joyce Kim?
Hello, good evening. Thank you so much for the informative meeting. There's a lot of time and effort and research went into the planning, and I'm very excited about it. But I have a question about the vendors, and I know there were a lot of questions that were already answered. My question is, the vendors have not been working since March, so it's about a year that we have not been working. And I know you are looking into other locations where vendors are able to vend, but how soon will that happen? What is the timeline? Because once the government opens, we would like to go back and work as soon as we can. And eliminating 15th Street is going to be a huge financial impact on all the vendors. That's where most of the visitors come. And
oh no!
Is someone talking?
You're not doing a good job with money.
Is talking, but we can hear you, Joyce.
Okay. So that's my concern. What is the timeline as far as when you're going to have relocations, sites for the vendors? How would that be communicated so that when the government does open, we are able to go back and start working? It's been a year. We've been paying taxes, quarterly taxes. We've been paying for parking, fees, and it's a huge financial burden on the vendors. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and we're very aware of there's a long history of vending in this location. I think to a degree I answered some of the question about why are we choosing this side of the road where there's incumbent users. It's just the nature of transportation planning is that you do need to go in straight lines for these types of facilities and most others. We do have a close relationship with DCRA. I don't have a timeline for you. I want to just be really upfront. I don't have a timeline for when we could bring anything else online or locations, but we're having a long conversation, and it's about city policy too. So it's not. I can't promise you it's going to be a one for one replacement or a location of the replacement. So these are big questions throughout the city. There's a lot of competition for curbside, and it's above my pay grade as well. But we're doing our best to try to find the places that make the most sense for the people who are displaced, the tour buses, the vendors, and find solution. I will say with the vending, there are, I believe there are hundreds of other vending locations. I know they're not where you've been, but on 17th Street, I know there are a number of spaces. They're all available by lottery, as I understand, on a daily basis. So the incumbent users, there's not like one or several individuals who always had that space. It's been sort of shuffled between a number of parties. So I don't have a direct answer. I'm going to work with DCRA to get you one. And perhaps we can, we're also working with MOAPI, the Mayor's Office of Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs, to try to make sure that we do outreach to the vending community and provide that information as we get it. So if you can leave us your information, I think we'll get it through the WebEx meeting links. We'll try to get back to you and answer those as we have updates.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for that question, Joyce. It's painful times. I'm going to ask you to unmute Robert Mandel, please, Molly.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name's Rob Mandel. I live up in Petworth in DC and travel through this corridor pretty regularly, at least I used to before times. But I travel over across the river to National Landing, and so I can't echo strongly enough the positive feedback you've already heard about treating this area and upgrading it with a safe and best-in-class cycle facility. I did want to point out a specific question that I had is related to the intersections with Jefferson and Madison. Those are really popular east-west connections for cycling, as well as pedestrian connections that often, when there's a long cycle, there's very little desire to wait there, especially during periods when there actually isn't all that much traffic. And surprisingly, on my commute, there are a number of times when that occurs, and with pedestrians waiting almost 120 seconds, it's a full 2 minutes. I'm just curious whether that might be something that you, how strongly you all feel about that, and whether there's maybe some wiggle room on that side, because I feel like we might wind up with a lot of folks, I won't use the J word, but walking across the street when they're not supposed to, just because it doesn't make any sense, and then causing a lot of conflict with cyclists that are trying to get through. Thank you.
I'm going to hand this to Adriana to answer, and thanks for the question, Rob.
Yeah, so we have to balance at both of those intersections the flow of the general purpose traffic that's been reduced to 1 lane southbound with everything else that's going on there. So one of the things that we did take a look at was just matching the cycle lengths between the AM and the PM. So that cycle length already exists during one period of the day, and we're just matching it and then trying to build up this all pedestrian interval. And when vehicles are stopped on 15th, pedestrians can still cross. We're just adding this extra interval to it. So something that we're really cognizant of, it is a long time to wait, but we're trying to do the best we can to balance all of those modes. As Drew said earlier in the presentation, that's really one of the big pedestrian trade-offs that we're seeing as a result of this project.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'll take one or two from the Q&A that I think we can answer verbally. One is, how about the bridge across to Arlington? So of course, there's the existing 14th Street bridge span that we will connect to with this project. I think you might be referring to the Long Bridge project. So that's a new bike ped bridge, sort of complementing a new railway bridge, four-track railway bridge that's going to be brought into the city from Arlington. And it's a little ways off, but yes, we do anticipate that there will be a connection to that. It would probably they come in sort of on different sides of the freeway. So we'd probably work around Ohio Drive with some sort of bicycle connection facility. But yes, that's clearly of interest to all parties. It's principally the responsibility of the National Park Service, as well as a role for VDOT to do state planning. So we'll be working on that. And then there was another question about pedicabs. Is there any formal plan to incentivize pedicab service from the White House and Tidal Basin? So I love pedicabs. I took one away from my wedding after the reception. So I'm a big believer in pedicabs. I don't know that we have a specific method or program to incentivize them. This facility will be wide enough for pedicabs to use. I think they're 4 feet wide at the wheelbase, so they have some tight situations at a lot of bollards in downtown. They can't fit through the bollards, but they should be able to fit in this Cycletrack. So if you encounter one, everyone please be patient with the pedicabs. But yes, we are believers in a variety of non-motorized forms of transportation, and this facility should be open for their use. One question that was earlier was about scooters, whether scooters were allowed to use bike facilities. Somebody said they also see them on the site. I believe they're certainly allowed to use bike facilities. They have a complementary speed. They usually travel. We limit them in DC to about 10 miles per hour. And that's a pretty similar speed to most bicycling. And so that's been the case since we dealt with this originally with Segways way back when those were a new thing. And those rules carry over to scooters. They're called personal mobility device, broad category of a lot of these micro mobility things that you see. And I won't speak to their allowed. They're allowed on DC sidewalks. Park Service, I think, would rather they not be on the sidewalks. Maybe our colleagues at Park Service want to chime in on that. I know they're there. I can't speak to the specifics on the Park Service rule about scooters.
So yeah, the scooters, that's certainly an issue that the Park Service has been grappling with over the last few years due to the popularity of the scooters. So we are developing plans to address that. Technically they're motorized, so they are in the roads a lot, but we do know that they go on the sidewalks quite a bit too. So it boils down to how the National Mall is used. We're loved to death, right? What I mean by that is we have 35 million visitors a year, and some of our infrastructure just isn't big enough or wide enough, and is aging. It just can't handle some of these increased volumes of use. So we are looking at that. I would encourage folks to look at the National Mall Plan, because it does touch on how we are addressing these things into the future.
Great. And I know we're simulcasting with Facebook. I'll ask my colleagues if they want to port in any questions from the Facebook channel. Maybe we can take one in between what they offer to do that. Molly, are we able to unmute Garrett Hennigan? I think he had a question just being alerted to.
Good evening. Thank you all so much for all the work that you put into this. My name is Garrett Hennigan. I'm from the Washington Area Bicyclist Association, and I was just checking back through my notes. In 2015, we started a petition focused on 15th Street and got 750 signatures. That was focused just on the piece down to Constitution. So this is obviously a much bigger piece of the pie and will be transformative. Wanted to ask two quick questions. The first, I understand we're talking about interim changes that can be done quickly as part of repaving. For the longer term design, I would encourage this team to look into, especially at intersections, protected intersections, some of the elements that could separate out bicyclists from pedestrians and some of those turning movements, because especially at Constitution and I suppose Independence, those conflicts are very serious. And while separating them with signals is good, giving people a little more space would be ideal. That's more of a comment. My second question for Mr. Keneally, was wondering if you could share when we could expect to see, if the public could expect to see any of the plans that you have for the southern portion of this, if you have a timeline for public outreach or something of that nature. Thank you.
Sure. So the National Park Service, in conjunction with our Federal Highway Administration, Federal Highways helps the National Park Service with our roadway rehabilitation projects. So yeah, that's something we can definitely share as the design advances. We are looking for later this year to execute the striping associated with that portion of East Basin Drive. And essentially, it's going to look similar to what the National Park Service did a couple years ago when we made some improvements off of the 14th Street Bridge. We redid that portion of the bike path, repaved it, replaced the retaining wall, and then we actually took away one lane along East Basin Drive in front of the Jefferson Memorial that has actually worked out very well. We were concerned about, how that vehicle and bicycle traffic would flow, given that we've, eliminated one of the vehicle lanes. But we're very pleased with the results of that. So what we're doing is planning a continuation of that effort that we did a couple years ago, the rest of the way along East Basin Drive. So drawings are continuing to be developed through the Federal Highway Administration for hopefully work to happen later this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Notice has his hand up. If we could unmute him.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank you for the effort on this project, which I hope will be transformative not only for DC, but for people by commuting from Arlington and Alexandria. I had a particular question again about the National Park Service segment. If there's planning to improve or maintain safety going from the new cycle track to the crosswalk across to the existing sidewalk that Will mentioned that takes you down towards the wharf. That is heavily used by commuters between Northern Virginia going to Southwest and near Southeast.
So I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna probably pass it to Will, because that's where the Park Service property ends, and DC takes responsibility of that portion of Main Avenue there at East Basin Drive, going, I guess it would be east underneath the railroad bridge, 14th Street Bridge, Case Bridge area. So that area is primarily DDOT.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So it's absolutely correct. It is a bike route today. It's on sidewalk bike route. There are some challenging elements to it. One being, I think you mentioned the exit from the freeway, and it's sort of like a blind approach for cyclists, and it's a blind approach for the people exiting the freeway to their mirrors and things like that. So it has some challenges that I can't promise what our timeline is for responding to those, but thank you for the comment. We're going to look into that as a follow-on and see.
I'm specifically concerned about the interaction between the cycle track and that crosswalk.
Oh, I see. So
you're making a right from
right. The crosswalk at East Basin going south. Okay, so that's the one. So two ways you can do it under this approach. You can use that crosswalk. We are actually as part of this project, we're shrinking how many lanes are crossing there. So that's the NPS project for East Basin. Instead of having two lanes that are continuing on East Basin, it'll be a single lane, because the cycle track will occupy one. So it should be inherently safer. It's just a shorter distance to cross for a cyclist or a pedestrian. Cyclists can continue to use that crosswalk to go south. There's also another crossover about 200 yards beyond that along East Basin that goes to the south side. You can continue on to Haynes Point there. You could also use the south side of the road, which has a fairly wide sort of aggregate concrete path that's maybe like 14 feet wide and has its own bridge. So between those two ways, so it will be safer. Instead of crossing two lanes on each approach, we're going to be crossing a single. And that's part of what we can look at for future more significant improvements. I think we mentioned at the beginning, but I'll just say again, this project, we're trying to get something we can implement this summer completed and then implement it. And then Drew and her team are going to give us 30% drawings for more significant changes to intersections where we could where we'd have to move signal poles and a lot of hardware, run conduit under the street, things that would take much longer than the 6 months we have to put this in. And so we'll have a good idea of what to do. We don't have a timeline for exactly when we would do that because we're still waiting for what those changes might be. But that's our intention, is to look at this whole corridor and see what else we could do to make it even better in the long term for everybody who's using it. There was another question over on the timeline. I want to say, which one was it? Nope, we answered the pedicab one. I'll find it in a second. Oh, it's a question about what are we doing on the. It's not this section of 15th Street, but between New York Avenue and H and I Street, right? This is where the sort of original 15th Street Cycletrack went into Lafayette Square. We were really proud to put that in, and it was great during the Obama administration. It was mostly open. Once in a while, it was closed. Over the last 4 years, it's been closed much more of the time, and starting in, I would say, June, closed all of the time. We're well aware of it, and we're trying to figure out an alternative path that would go up 15th Street, but we don't have, it's not part of this project scope. We'll be working on it, but outside of this discrete effort that Drew and her team are leading. So you can follow up with us about that in the future, but I know it's of concern to everybody who uses this corridor, and it's a major missing piece. We are putting in bus lanes, sort of bus bike lanes on H and I Street, so those could be viable crossovers, and that's also a 2021 project. So we'll be looking at all the options that we have to better link the northern part together, so that we can actually use it no matter what's happening at the White House.
Great, thank you. Well, Molly, were there any questions from the Facebook Live stream that you'd like to draw to our attention? If not, we'll move to the next slide and start wrapping up. Great, thank you. And then the next one after
Facebook.
Sorry?
There was nothing from Facebook.
Oh, thank you for your confirmation. So we talked to, thank you all for those great questions, comments, and concerns. We're documenting them as a result of this meeting. We'll bring them forward to the design team's consideration, and I hope that we can be responsive to, you'll find us responsive to them in the next iteration of our work, which includes, again, some more stakeholder meetings, refinements of the design and recommendations for the more robust and time-consuming elements that would move into the long-term improvement set. Then there will be, did I say already, there will be a second public meeting where we show you a little bit more about the advancements of designs, especially of those places that you're concerned about. And the project is planned for installation this summer. So really rapid response and quick schedule to get the facility in place and get the design in place for more robust treatments in the long run. We encourage you to stay in touch with the project website at this location, and is also in the chat. Share your ideas and comments. We're tracking them, documenting, and to the best extent possible, responding to them within the limitations of this scope of work for this interim project. Is there anything else you'd like to say in wrapping up? Well, we can rest on the next slide of the vision for what will be in the section.
Thank you so much to everybody who's gotten us this far. This is, again, very exciting. And I'll just share a little personal history. When I first started working for DDOT in 2010 was when it was a year after we installed the first bit of 15th Street Cycletrack. It was a one-way facility in 2009 between Massachusetts and U Street. And when I came on in 2010, we changed that. We expanded it to go from to be two-way. We went up to V Street on the northern end, and we went down to really it was Vermont on the southern end at that point. And the next year we took it, the section from New York to Pennsylvania. So it's, and then I left the agency. My colleagues brought it north to Euclid Street. So we're really, like I said at the beginning, one piece at a time, but we've got now a very long and very well connected facility. There's a lot of cross-linking bikeways that intersect with it. And so I'm really excited. This feels like the culmination of a major part of my life, really, to be working on this project that will bring it all the way to the 14th Street Bridge into Arlington. And so you have my commitment to work really diligently to answer the great questions you guys have had on the design and how to make it safe and usable for everybody. And I'm really excited about delivering this summer and make ourselves available for any further questions and input. I hope you can join us the next time where we'll have hopefully a finalized design for the next public meeting that will go in probably the following month. So really exciting times to be working this fast. So thank you to everybody and have a great night. Enjoy what remains of our snowstorm here in DC if that's where you are.
Great, thank you. And with that, we'll end the meeting.